Oh, good evening, everybody. My name is Naeema Muhammad, and I am the organizer director with the North Carolina Environmental Justice Network. And can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, you can go to the next slide. Okay, so North Carolina Environmental Justice Network, our mission is to promote health and environmental equality for all people in North Carolina through community action for clean industry, safe workplaces, and fair access to all human and natural resources. We seek to accomplish these goals through organizing, advocacy, research, and education based on principles of economic equity and democracy for all people. Next, okay. And the problem, as we see it, is that all individuals and groups of people should live in a safe and healthy environment. However, because of their race, ethnicity, and income, many North Carolinians have been subjected to living in unsafe environments. This is environmental injustice. Environmental injustices exist because many businesses, government agencies, and other organizations in positions of power have discriminatory practices and policies. This is what it means when something becomes institutionalized. Environmental injustices at national level. Thus, environmental injustice is everyone's problem. And the counties in North Carolina, we have 100 counties, and the counties are broken down into tiers. And the tiers is based on the economic wealth, or I should say, and poverty of the county. And so the that is how they determine what the county tier number is. The lower the tier, the more poverty exists in those counties. And these are the areas with the most poverty and are predominantly communities consisting of African Americans, Latinos, Native Americans, and other poor communities. And we would note that as we look at the maps, that these same areas are indicated whether we're talking about tier destinations, population percentages, or hog operations. These are obvious examples of environmental racism, or some may say disproportionately impacted communities. So you're looking at the tier destinations, and the tier one counties are all the counties in blue. As you can see the description down below that tells you what the tier numbers are for the counties by the color. And so these are all the counties that's in poverty in North Carolina out of the 100 counties that exist. And so you can see that the majority of the counties are tier one counties. Okay, findings listed the physical mental effects caused by specific air irritants, including acute eye irritation, burning eyes, acute nasal irritation, runny nose, sore throat, difficulty breathing, chest tightness, being nervous or anxious, being stressed or annoyed. Okay, so I believe you might have skipped some slides.
I am so sorry about that. I can try going back.
Okay.
Was it before this map or after?
No, it should have been after.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm sorry
Okay.
about that. I'm not seeing another one.
Okay, that's okay. Maybe I got them out of order some kind of way. But at any rate, these are some research results that was done when we were looking at the health impacts of communities living near the industrial hog operations in eastern North Carolina. And after doing the research, these are some of the causes that we found, some of the effects that we found of the health impacts on people living nearby those operations. So those are the types of illnesses and conditions that people suffer with living near those operations. And this study was done by Dr. Steve Wing from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, Rachel Horton, who was one of his students, and Leah Shanassi, who was also a student. They were all in the Department of Epidemiology in the School of Public Health. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so then you're looking at the population map, and as we look at the population map and remember what we saw in the tier 1 counties, if you know that most of your communities of color, African American, Native American, Latinx, and poor communities are in the dark burgundy areas, and those are all tier 1 areas, and that is where the majority of the pollution in North Carolina exists, whether we're talking about hog operations, which is now what they call industrial agriculture, or landfills, or sewage sludge, coal ash, almost any kind of environmental harm that you can name is in eastern North Carolina. Okay, we can move forward to the next slide. So this is a map of North Carolina, and what you see filling in is red dots. The red dots represent, and if you look at the years change, it shows you how the industrial agriculture of pork grew in North Carolina from the beginning of its time entering up until about 1994, I believe is going to be the stopping point. But you see the count, that count represents the number of operations that exist from year to year. And so you can see how rapid the growth was in North Carolina of the industrial pork industry. And you also would note by the red dots that, again, we're looking at mainly eastern North Carolina is where the most animals exist. While there's a total of about a little over 9 million hogs in North Carolina, we have more hogs than people. But the majority of those animals are in eastern North Carolina. And right at this point of the map where you can't see the counties, that's Duplin County, which is down near Warsaw, North Carolina, Wallace area going towards I-40 East, traveling to Wilmington to get to the beach. You pass by Duplin County, first Sampson County, and then Duplin County. Duplin County has been named the hog capital of the world. They have the most pigs in Duplin County than they have anywhere else in the country. And Sampson County is number 2. Duplin has about 2.2 million pigs, and Sampson County has about 2 million. And in those 2 counties, they're side-by-side counties. You leave one, enter into the other without realizing it. They have about 77 animals per person combined with those 2 counties. Okay, we can go to the next map. Okay, this is in 1999 we had Hurricane Floyd, which broke a 500-year floodplain in eastern North Carolina. And these are the hog houses. You see the roofs of them, the top of them, and those are all dead pigs got flushed out of those hog houses because of the flooding that took place. And this was just one little area. And these, again, we have many of these animals all over eastern North Carolina being flushed out of those hog houses. Millions of pigs died during that flooding. And these are, we still don't to this day know where they buried or what they did with all these dead animals. Did they bury them? Did they send them to the rendering plant, which is where they send a lot of dead animals in those counties? They have a rendering plant. They have trucks that come by and pick up the dead animals and take them to the rendering plant. But we don't know what they did with these, and they did not make it public information. And it was an awful lot of pigs. So we really wondering what did they do with them. But we never got an answer from anybody in this state. Okay, we can move to the next slide. What does all of this have to do with climate change? The picture that you just saw was one of the results of Hurricane Florence that hit eastern North Carolina in September 1999, breaking a 500-year floodplain. Most of our EJ, environmental justice communities, are sitting in the floodplains in North Carolina because, as we see it, eastern North Carolina is known as the NIMBY, meaning not in my backyard, for North Carolina. It is very clear to those of us living in eastern North Carolina, whatever white folks don't want in their backyards, then eastern North Carolina is the place to be. All these communities are sitting in harm's way and have been made to become ticking time bombs as climate change shows itself more and more each day. Climate change can have a huge effect on people living near all of the industrial agriculture, better known as CAFOs, or concentrated animal feeding operations. Common sense says what happened in 1999 can only be more likely to occur again as we begin to see more and more of the unusual hurricanes and weather patterns around the world. In North Carolina, we just recently experienced Hurricane Matthew that left thousands of people struggling to save their homes and personal belongings, and many of the animals were killed again, creating massive problems for their owners and nearby residents. As we look at all communities of color and poor communities across the globe having been made to host all of these hazardous waste sites, from CAFOs to landfills to waste incinerators to the spraying of human waste on crops as fertilizer, to basic human right denial of clean air and water, we can only hope that climate change doesn't join Mother Nature and say, we've had enough of this greed. We go freezing to burning hot all in the same day and sometimes all in the same hour. And I'm sure many of you have experienced that if you're here in North Carolina. Probably anywhere in this country, doesn't have to be North Carolina, how rapid the weather can change from one thing to another. You leave out the house in the morning dressed for cool weather, and by the time you come back outside again, it's massive hot and you're burning up. And so you're overdressed. Um, but these are the results of climate change. And as you all probably know from paying attention to the news lately, we've had more hurricanes in North Carolina since Matthew. We had Matthew, then we had Michael, then we had what was that, Dorian, and then Hurricane Florence. And all of these hurricanes flushed out all these environmental hazard sites in North Carolina, in Eastern North Carolina, flushed things that were housed out of the buildings that they were being contained in. And we had coal ash in the waters, Gen X, pigs, chickens, um, animal waste. Animal waste. We had human waste. We had two waste treatment plants spilled out 600,000 gallons of human waste into the water when Hurricane Florence came. And so it was a mixture of all those things. And then people are having to navigate through this water, this nasty water, to try to get to safety. And it was just a real problem. And we still don't know what the health effect is going to be from all of that. So we can move to the next slide. What are some effects? What are some effects of environmental injustice? As you view these next slides that I would share, I ask you to use your imagination to picture how and why people are being forced to live with unclean water, ill health, low wage jobs, lack of enjoyment of a qualitative life, diminished property values, higher asthma rates in children, and tremendous stress levels, just to name a few things. Many people in these communities live in fear of speaking up for change because of retaliation, job loss, and even being forced to move due to the fact that the business owners are also the homeowners, employers, law enforcement, and yes, even government representatives. Let us not forget the denial of the basic human right to clean water and being able to breathe clean air. The human right to water was formally recognized by the United Nations in 2010, stating that it is the responsibility of companies to ensure that their operations do not infringe upon the right of individuals to sufficient, safe, acceptable, and physically accessible and affordable water. This right was further enforced by the UN Sustainable Development Goal 6, which calls for global water quality to be improved by reducing pollution and minimizing the release of hazardous chemicals. You can go, okay, and so what you're looking at here on the left are the hogs that I was talking about, and you can see how crowded they are inside their cages and stuff. They barely have room to move around. Many of them wind up with broken limbs and stuff because of the lack of exercise of being able to move about. And when they're pregnant, they have the babies right in here. So a lot of times the babies get eaten by the pigs, get eaten as they're being birthed, and then they just don't make it. And over to the right, you're looking at that's the outside of the hog house that these animals are in. And so you could have up to 5,000 pigs in one of these little houses. So you can imagine how crowded it is. And these are fans, industrialized fans, these big things sitting on the outside of these buildings to ventilate the houses to try to keep the conditions from being any worse than they already are. And but so it causes everything that it's blowing out on communities that's right nearby. Many of these houses are sitting, you can stand in your back door and look right out at these hog houses. And here you have these pipes running out. They're running out from the hog houses, from underground, and they're running out into this water you see. It's not water, it's animal waste. It's feces and urine that's being flushed out of the hog houses, and you can see it coming through the pipe, and it sits out in what's called an open air lagoon. And I always tell people, as you can see, we're not talking about that blue lagoon Brooke Shields was hanging out in it. But this is a lagoon that's filled with nothing but animal waste, and it's sitting out, it's uncovered, and get a lot of hydrogen sulfide and ammonia and other chemicals that come off of these lagoons, and that's what's making people sick. You got high rates of asthma in children. People complain with a lot of runny noses, burning eyes, stress. High, we found them to have elevated blood pressures and other illnesses, upper respiratory problems from the exposure to this animal waste. Mm. And we can move to the next slide. You're looking here at these are dead fish that's coming from our rivers in North Carolina. And the water keepers and the river keepers of North Carolina are constantly really on a daily basis, monitoring the rivers in North Carolina for water quality, and they're starting to find a lot of dead fish and a lot of algae blooms in the waterways because of the amount of animal waste that's running into our rivers and streams that come off of those lagoons that you were just looking at. Because the lagoons, when they flush out or when they take the waste from those lagoons, when the lagoon begin to fill up, to keep from getting a violation, they flush the lagoons out by irrigating that waste into the air around the areas where they're located and spraying it on crops in the communities to try to lower the levels of their waste inside those lagoons. and that's what's making people sick. And it also runs downhill into the rivers and streams and ditches in the community, and those streams and stuff go straight to the river, and that's why our rivers are being made very sick in North Carolina because of these all of the animal waste that's going into the streams and rivers, and the fish are dying. And so this is an example of some of the fish. And as you look closely, you see where it looks like somebody bit off of them. Those are spores that they get from being in that dirty water, and they coming out with these diphtheria and stuff like that on. And um, also, some of the river keepers told us that fishermen that fish in these rivers have been known to have these sores. One of the head of the waterkeeper Alliance by the name of Rick Dove, he showed us pictures of his legs where he had the same sores on his legs that the fish had because he was a fisherman. And he got so sick, he didn't think he was going to make it. But he lived to tell the story and to continue doing the work of monitoring rivers and streams in North Carolina. Okay, next slide. Again, this is just a closer up look of a fish, like from all those fish you saw laying there. But and that's the sore that they have on. Look like somebody bit off of them again. Okay, we can move to the next slide. I think it's gonna be worse than that. Okay, so you're looking at the water keepers out on the river, the Neuse River that is, as a matter of fact. And you see that look like all that white stuff, those are dead fish. Those are all the dead fish in that river in the area where they were. Okay, we can move to the next slide. Okay. So what are some of the health and economic effects of environmental injustice? Excuse me one second. Um, so it has been well documented by the work of former epidemiologist Dr. Steve Wing and some of his colleagues from the School of Public Health at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill through their research that people living in these unhealthy communities have higher rates of elevated blood pressures, upper respiratory conditions, and higher stress levels. They also, through another research, showed that children living within a 2.5 miles of CAFOs suffer a high rate of asthma, on more asthma medications, missing more time out of school than children living 5 miles away from those same operations. Research has also shown that the waters are highly contaminated, forcing people living in these communities to stop using their wells and now having to purchase enough clean water for their use. Most people have been forced to buy water versus getting it from their wells, make more hospital and emergency room visits, purchase washers and dryers, or go to the laundromat versus walking out their back doors and hanging their laundry on their clotheslines. They have to purchase air conditioners instead of being able to freely open their doors and windows, pay higher medical expenses through doctor's visits and medications. They are no longer able to use their backyards for family gatherings such as cookouts, birthday parties, family reunions, or just being able to get with neighbors and enjoy a time of food and fellowship. And all these things they have been forced out of doing because of those lagoons that I showed you and the waste sitting out there and the stench that comes off of those lagoons. People, we've had reports from people of them getting throwing up, gagging, trying to walk from maybe from one house to another in the neighborhood, and it's just almost unbearable to be outside. Next slide. And so this is the research that I talked about when I was giving you the statistics on some of the conditions that we found people that have the health impacts. This came from the study we did called Community Health Effects of Industrial Hog Operations. So you're looking at the journal book that we designed that people would have to fill out every day. And so they would take the journal and they were asked to sit outside for 10 minutes at a time, once in the morning, once in the evening, time of their own choosing. And then they were given that little timer right there, set the timer when they go outside so nobody stays out more than 10 minutes. And then they were asked to answer the questions inside the journal. And the questions was they in the odor when during the time that they were outside? If so, could they rate that odor on a scale of 0 to 8, with 8 being the strongest? And if so, did they suffer any kind of reactions to that exposure? And then there were a list of things in the journal, such as, burning eyes, runny nose, headaches, nausea, irritant, or just whatever kinds of things they felt. They were asked to describe it. And there were other questions that they would answer throughout during that 10-minute period while they sit outside. When 10 minutes were up, they were asked to go back inside, and they were given a blood pressure monitor, take their blood pressure, print it out, and then tape it to that journal page for that time that 10-minute time they were outside. And then in the little box right there, saliva tubes, they were asked to take. They had little straws, and they would put the straw inside the bottle and put saliva through the straw into the bottle, cap the bottles back up, close the box, put it in a plastic bag, and put it in the freezer. And that's where they would keep it until one of our team members from the study would come and collect all the information. And then they were asked to breathe into this little peak flow meter here at the bottom of your screen. It's a peak flow meter, and they would breathe into that to check lung capacity. And that's how we were able to document the health effects from living in those operations during the time that people participated. And each person participated for 14 days. And after 14 days were up, they were, we were a team member will go by and collect up all these instruments that you're looking at and take them back up to the university. And during the time that people were sitting outside, go to the next slide for me. Okay, that's not the one. Okay. Anyway, during the time that people were sitting outside, we had scientific equipment out there that was capturing the fine particles in the air, because there's a lot of dandruff that come off of those animals and it gets into the air because it's blown out through those industrial fans that you saw attached to those buildings. And all that stuff is flushed out into the community. And fine particles like dust mites, so you can't see them, but you can be breathing them in. And with the amount of respiratory problems and asthma rates, we that was a good thing to do in the study, to capture those particles and get them analyzed to try to see what's in them that's making people sick. And so some of the participant statements, these are some of the things that people have said to us about what happens to them in their life, their daily life, trying to live around these animals. They can't have guests because they feel embarrassed. They say they feel embarrassed because people be talking about, what is that smell? And how can you stand it? And it makes them feel bad, and it's embarrassing as if they can control it. Can't have guests. They don't have cookouts and family reunions where they used to use their property to do whatever they want to do outside, without having to rent buildings and stuff. They no longer do it that way. They have to now find a place where they can do what they want to do and pay somebody to use the facility versus going just out in a yard somewhere and doing it. They can't play outside. The children don't play outside. You don't see them outside playing. In all the years that I've been traveling through these communities, you do not see children outside playing because of the stench. It stinks so bad. They don't, and the gardening, they don't do their gardening the way they used to. They'll show you how the weeds are growing up because they can't get out there like they want to. So trying to do any kind of outside work is almost out of the question. And people, they feel like they negotiating with the air. They have to get up early in the morning, crack the door open just a little bit to see if it's stinking outside. If it's not stinking, they rush out to do what they gotta do so they can get back in before the odor comes. Because the odor is unpredictable. You don't know when it's coming. And their property values are devalued. Their property is being greatly devalued by these industries sitting near them. But nobody wants to live there. Can't sell the property because nobody's going to buy it if they know what's going on. Nobody else is going to want to live there. They had to buy air conditioners, clothes buyers versus going outside hanging the clothes on their clothesline. Because when they put the clothes on the clothesline, if the odor comes, then it gets into the clothes and they have to redo their laundry. They had difficulty sleeping because of the odor gets into the house because it can seep in through vents and stuff. And also the truck traffic is so tremendous. And the trucks are coming in and out of those operations. So they may be coming down a little path that's across the street from somebody's house. And then the lights from the trucks are shining into people's bedroom windows, disturbing their sleep. Okay, we can move to the next one. So what you're looking at here, okay, all the way to the backside of hog houses, you see how many are there just in that little small area. And what you see in the air that look like water, that's hog waste. That's animal waste being sprayed out through one of those industrial irrigators. And they're just spraying it out to empty out the lagoon. And when they're doing that, trust me, you don't want to be nowhere near because it stinks so darn bad you can't hardly breathe and you really will get sick on the stomach. And then as we come out to the highway, we're looking at what's called a dead box. And those are dead pigs. These animals, they put in these boxes. You see pigs here, but it could be some chickens and turkeys at the bottom because what we have found is that the same places where these pigs are, they begin setting up chicken houses and turkey houses, as the poultry industry began a massive re-entry into North Carolina. And so you're looking at these dead pigs. Now what they will sit there until what's called a dead truck. It's a truck that just come around and pick up nothing but dead animals. They ride all through the county and pick up all the dead animals out of these dead boxes. And they take them to the rendering plant, which is not that far away from this area of Duplin County. And they will take these dead animals to the rendering plant. They grind them up and make feed out of them and give it back to the animals. So again, it's just the spraying of the speaker waste in the air, these dead boxes. And buzzards lurk around these things. A lot of snakes and rats and rodents and other pests. People complain constantly about the massive, yet big yellow flies that's hanging out in their communities around their doors and windows, and making it difficult for them to want to go outside as well. And also, so you got the flies and you got big excessive amounts of mosquitoes. That's a problem as well. So we can move to the next slide. And so these are some of the statements from the study that was done, and we did interviews with people that were participants in the study to talk with them about their lives before and after the industry came to town. And people told us like the odor is sickening. It gets in our house, in our car. I am self-conscious. I'm angry. I had a rose garden. Do you see those weeds there? I haven't done it for the past few years. We can't go outside such disgusting odor. And you can see the spraying again in that little window to the right, the spraying to the backside. And this is somebody's home right here where you see the little blue covering over a track that looks like. and with the fence around it. There's somebody living right there. You can see how close that is to their home. And if the wind get up under this animal waste, it carries that like a mist. Like if you ever been outside and it's raining and it get you got a lot of wind, you see a lot of misty rain, but it gets up under this animal waste and carry it in a mist form, and it can travel for miles. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, and again, this is somebody's home. You can see the spraying right here at the, like it's in their front yard. Well, it is in their front yard, but that's animal waste coming out of that um, irrigator right there. So you can see how close which anybody who wants to come outside with something like that going on. Okay, next slide. And so you're looking here, what you're looking at in 1997, there was a moratorium put in place in North Carolina to try to slow down the growth of the pork industry into North Carolina. And every 2 years, that moratorium is up for renewal. In 2007, we found out in 2006 that the moratorium coming up for 2007 may not get renewed because there had been so much lobbying by the pork industry uh, that our legislators was falling for everything they were being told. And so they were very divisive about whether or not to renew that moratorium. So we formed a coalition with the Water Keepers, the River Keepers, North Carolina Environmental Justice Network, some of our community partners from out of the many counties that's impacted by this industry. And we held a 51-hour vigil on the legislative grounds called Halifax Mall, and we held a 51-hour vigil there. And as we held the vigil, we decided to set up a mock hog farm. So what you're looking at here is our mock hog farm. Those are two little hog houses that two of the community members built. And we bought two baby swimming pools, which you see right here in the middle with a little white thing sitting in it. So we bought the two baby swimming pools, and that was our lagoon. And then the little white thing is where we made an irrigator so that we could let the waste spray out like it does in the community. And it was spinning around and waste was just flying around. And we trucked in, you see that white container there, we trucked in 40 gallons of what we call organic fertilizer, because in the community, they tell people that that waste is organic fertilizer, and that and they tell the legislators that people are lying when they say it's making them sick and that it stink real bad. So we trucked in 40 gallons of organic fertilizer and we poured it into our lagoon. And as we were pouring it in, the facilities manager came over and asked us what we doing. And when we told him, he said, "Well, who told y'all to bring that animal waste out here?" We said, "Nobody, but didn't nobody tell us not to either." He said, "Well, if y'all spill one drop on this lawn out here, we're going to have to fine your organizations thousands of dollars for cleanup, because we're going to have to call in hazmat because it's toxic waste." We was like, "Really? We didn't know that, because when we loaded it on the truck, it was organic fertilizer. So we don't understand how we drove 40 miles up the road and then you telling us it's toxic waste." Well, he got away from us and he didn't come back anymore because he knew he had messed up when he called it toxic waste. We knew it was toxic, but y'all the ones up here falling for these lies from the industry. So we just want to see how what you really believe, just let you have a taste. And so we set up right here, and the office building that the legislators come out of is right here to your left. And then they have to walk down that little brick path you see right there, those bricks, to get over to the administrative building for their meetings. So they had to walk right past our little hog farm. And the waste was spraying, and they was looking down, what is that smell? We was like, organic fertilizer. And they was like, well, it's stinking out here. We was like, point exactly. you can't take 40 gallons, but you expect the communities to live with 19 million tons of this stuff every year. So, and that's why we need the moratorium to slow this mess down. And y'all need to clean this up and get away from this lagoon spray field system, which is outdated. There is new technology that exists that could be better used to handle this waste than this lagoon system that they use. Um, Smithfield, who's the owner of the 10 million pigs in North, over 9 million pigs in North Carolina, um, paid this researcher from North Carolina State by the name of Mike Williams $17.2 million to do research to identify clean technology. This was in 1998. Mike Williams found 5 new technologies that could be used to handle the waste that wouldn't cause it to have to be housed in an open air lagoon. It wouldn't have to be sprayed out around the communities. But the port industry came out and said it was not economically feasible for them to get that technology on the ground because they didn't want to spend any of their $1 billion worth of profits every year to go towards making life better for everybody else. All right, so we can go to the next slide. And so community insights. Some of the things we talk with communities about doing is attending their local governmental meetings and asking these questions. What's the environmental impact of or environmental benefit of this policy you are trying to pass? Have you done an environmental impact statement when the industry is saying they want to locate in an area? There should be an environmental impact done that will look at the social and economic conditions that already exist in that community. And if there's greater harm to be done, then they really should not issue permits to these industries to locate there. But our government and our regulatory agency is not doing the best job to protect the people of North Carolina. And so as a result, people have to deal with all this stuff you've just seen, plus other environmental harms. And it says, do you want these pollution generating operations to come to your neighborhood? Would these people that's passing all this stuff, that's issuing these permits, would they want this stuff near them? And if not, why do you think somebody else want to live with it? And then how are you working on economic development to alleviate some of the problem caused by these sources of pollution? And one of the things that we talk about with not just the community people, but when we had the opportunity to talk with government officials, is they need a better understanding of economic development because they really don't know what economic development is. These local governments, these industries come in and tell them, if you let us put this there, we can bring your county $1 million or $2 million worth of tax base, and not understanding what all the impact of that industry would be on that county or on people living in that county, they fall for that dollar amount that they hear and they don't think about anything else. And so we're helping citizens learn to ask, you know, certain questions about economic development. What's the health impact? What's going to be the impact on our air, our water, our property, just our right to have a qualitative life, and to, and to look at all of those things as a consideration of economic development. If you're going to be making everybody sick in the county, that is not economic development. People want to become unable to work and can't, and they can't maintain their lifestyles, and that's going to impact tax value in the county as well. And it can overwhelm that little money they thought they was getting from these industries. Okay, next slide. And finally, to everybody listening, it takes all of us. This is the work that we do, but we know that environmental injustice is everybody's problem. I always say to people, if you drink water, if you breathe, if you eat, if you flush a toilet, if you turn on a water faucet, if you put trash out for the trash collectors, then environmental injustice every your problem as well. Because it's something, all of these things have to go somewhere. And you said, where do they wind up at? And what we found is that they wind up here in Eastern North Carolina, sitting in communities where people have been perceived to have the least amount of economic and political clout to fight these industries with their millions of dollars that they bring, that they come in with, and hiring all these high-powered lawyers that get up and lie for them. Thank y'all for listening. I hope it's been helpful, and I'm ready for any questions.
So the first question here is from Cameron, and they ask, the impacts you've focused on are in relation to hog waste and farming specifically. Have any other forms of livestock, so like chickens or cows, had similar impacts on the community? Is the way waste is handled for other livestock the same, or is it just as bad in terms of odor and fecal exposure?
Okay, thank you. So there are other industrial animals. There's a whole industrial agriculture going on in North Carolina, really all around this country. And it's pigs, it's hogs, it's chickens, it's turkeys, it's cows, just depending on where you are. Some of these things exist in all of these animals exist in Eastern North Carolina. And but outside of North Carolina, there are communities that we collaborate with and work with and talk with that's dealing with massive cattle industries that's as massive as these hog industries are in North Carolina. And so it's industrial agriculture is a problem all over this country. And it has a huge impact, on our food chain that people don't really know about or understand. And we always, like Smith always brag that they feed the world. And we was like, yeah, off the backs of the poor. And so, you ain't bragging about nothing when you destroying everybody's life and saying you feed the world. And yeah, you putting all the dollar bills in your pocket. You do nothing to help out the people that's suffering. And the workers in these plants. I don't know if you all are familiar with the Smithfield packing plant out on Highway 87 in what's called Tar Heel, North Carolina. But they employ about 5,500 workers, slaughtering about 39,000 pigs every single day. And that's why there's such massive production in North Carolina to keep that slaughterhouse going. Not for the workers, but for the industry to continue their profiting and and pocketing everything and not taking care of anybody else. Workers are not paid decent wages there. The work conditions are just you would not believe it. And the workers and during this pandemic stage, the workers in these packing houses have really suffered, and many of them have been made sick and had the COVID because of the close work conditions and them not being informed. And the bosses use the Privacy Act as their reason for not informing workers when another worker gets sick. And so you working right next to somebody that's got COVID and you don't know it, and then you exposed and never informed you've been exposed. Then you go home to your family, and so you're exposing everybody else. So many of these workers have been made sick during this pandemic time, and they claim that the meat packing industry is one of those essential jobs that must go, but it must go because some folks don't want to lose their profits. It's not about anything else.
And just sort of a follow-up, asked how we can help the workers.
Say that again.
Sort of as a follow-up, someone in the chat asked how we can provide support or help the workers who are working in these industries.
Okay, how can we help the workers that's working in these industries? Um, w- now that's a good question. It's not one that I have an immediate answer for, but it is one that we can get to. But there's also a website that you can go to. Um, it's called Safe Jobs, Safe like SAFE, Safe Jobs Save Lives, and it's the Southern Workers Assembly, and they have this campaign going on called Safe Jobs Save Lives. So the website would be the Southern Workers Assembly, and you can read all about that campaign. And they may have some ways in there that you could get some ideas about how to assist the workers. The only thing I know to tell you is again for us to think about our what we do as consumers that contribute to these industries' ability to do all the stuff that they do.
Okay, thank you. So our next question is from Maya. I've read that there are some studies in North Carolina where biogas from hog waste is captured and harnessed as energy. What are your thoughts on this? If this technology was implemented, what would some impact be for local communities?
Okay, so that is something that we're battling with right now in the state, because many of the people living in these communities, we don't see biogas as an answer to the problem in North Carolina, because all that does is incentivize the industry to continue doing business as they do it. If they are not going to get rid of those lagoons and spray fields, there is no relief for the people living nearby. And so, what we need in this state is for them to get rid of those lagoons and spray fields and get some of that clean technology that does exist. And you can look it up if you go to Google and call up superior technology, and you will see there's 5 different technologies that can be used to handle that waste that would be better than a lagoon and spray field.
Thank you.
And I thought I saw somebody asking something about DEQ.
Yeah. So one of the questions was, what does the NCDEQ need to do better for North Carolina communities? Are Governor Cooper's new environmental justice task forces changing anything, or listening to the NCEG network?
Okay. Well, the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality is part of the root problem of what we're dealing with here in North Carolina, because they continue to issue permits to these dirty industries, and they don't evaluate the area, the locations. They don't look at, they should have, and we've been battling with this about this, they should have a Title VI tool in place that would force them to look closely at the environmental impacts, the potential environmental impacts from these industries on the places they want to locate, and looking wholly at that community. What's already there? Do they need anything else? What is the makeup of this? Is this a poor community? People already struggling, going through different issues, looking at the socio and economic development of an area, and make their decisions based on the truth and not the lies that the industry tells them. Because right now, what happens, the industries is the ones hiring consultants to do environmental impact statements, and those consultants put together what the industry wants, and because that's what they're being paid to do. And so we have looked at environmental impact statements where you could obviously see where they have excluded a whole mass of people in order to make their impact statement look like it's good to go. And so that's a real problem. DEQ claim they don't have the authority to deny these permits, but we have been, pushing back against that, because if you the regulatory agency and you don't have the power, who the hell in the state got the power? Excuse my French, but that's what I mean. Who has the power if you, as the regulatory agency, don't have the power? That's just a lie they tell them to go along with these industries. And the Governor Cooper's plan, still lack a lot when you look at environmental injustice. That it lacks a lot to be taken into consideration for making life better for everybody in the state.
Yeah. And sort of as a follow-up, Juliana asked, do you think that like these like environmental justice reports are sort of actually participatory, or are they just sort of checking boxes by holding public meetings and public comment periods? It's like, are they actually effective?
Oh, that's another area of sore spot for communities, because we do believe that these meetings are check box checkers. They just checking off. We have to have, we are mandated to hold public hearings, so we're gonna hold a public hearing, but we're not gonna hear anything. We only hear what the industry is saying. And so that is a source of problem here in North Carolina as well. But again, there's a whole group of people that's pushing back against that behavior by them and starting to call them out on it. Thinking maybe if we can't do nothing, we embarrass them enough, they'll do different. Although some of these capitalists can't be embarrassed. But you got to take the money, you got to hit them in the pocket. That's the only thing they're gonna hear. You hit them in the pocket.
Yes. And sort of one last question. Has there been any recent progress on legislation that restricts pollution from CAFOs? Could this upcoming election present new opportunities to fight for changes in the law?
No, there have not been any that I'm aware of. Can you repeat that question and make sure I'm answering it completely?
Yeah. So has there been any recent progress on legislation that restricts pollution from CAFOs? Could this upcoming election present new opportunities to fight for changes in the law?
Okay, thank you. So again, the answer is no, there have not been any change, and I don't see any great hope as we go forward with the folks that's coming forward that's running for election. And one of the things that we constantly talk about and discuss in the network along with our communities is what we need is to groom our own candidates and run them for office. That's gonna be the only real way to get some impact for changes for people. But as long as you running these people that's being paid by these industries to sit in these seats, we'll never get the changes that we need. So we have to begin to groom our own candidates for these seats. And that's starting at the local level. We must start at the local level, because a lot of these industries get in because they go to these local governments. And one of the other things that DEQ said to us was, once the local government gives the okay for an industry to locate there, they really don't have the authority to override that decision. But again, I think that's just a lie. I think there is a way that they could do it if they would stand up and take the backbone that it takes to do that. But you got to have some spine in this state to work with this stuff, because these industries are just running amok, doing whatever they want to do.
And we have one more question. So Jason asked, what was the name of the alternative technology you mentioned that avoids the use of lagoons?
Okay, it's called Superior. It's Superior Technology, but if you look up Superior Technology, you're gonna get it should be 5 different choices there. And I don't know the names of the different types of technology, but I do know that there were 5 identified and named by the researcher that did that work. And it is public information, so you should be able to find it. by Googling superior technology.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions?
And before I go, I do want to tell you all, in case you're interested, starting in the North Carolina Environmental Justice Network, every year we hold an annual Environmental Justice Summit where we bring together community, academicians, students, researchers, and government. And we hold a day and a half summit where we talk about all of the things that you heard me talk about tonight, but also a total picture of the environmental concerns in North Carolina and what's being done, and looking at ways that we can move forward as a community in North Carolina to try to make conditions better for people that's having to live in these communities around all this waste and around all these ills. The summit it will start October the 10th. Is our first session, which is gonna be a film showing and discussion. And the film showing is called Mossville, When Great Trees Fall. And it's about a Black community, I think down in the Alabama area, I believe it is, or Mississippi, one of those. Louisiana. Okay. Well, it's somewhere in the South, and it shows what happens to a community when industries come in and just overpower and overtake the community. How it forced people out of their homes, and I mean, it is a very moving film. And then after the film shows, we will hold a discussion with people, and there will be someone representing that community facilitating this discussion. And then that's on October the 10th, and then we will have 2 weekends following that. We will have different. We will have EJ panelists on the second session of the summit, and we will be presenting on policing, pollution, pandemic, and public violence. And our theme for our summit is "We Can't Breathe," and it's underlined is policing, pollution, public violence, and pandemic. And that's our theme is focused around that, and it's connected, with the Black Lives Matter movement. And so you can go to our website at www.ncejn. I'll type it into the chat box right quick, and that's what I should be in. Okay, www.org. That's the website you can go in. You can go to get information about the summit. When you go to the website, just click on events. You click on events, then the first thing come up, you're gonna see EJ Summit. If you click on that summit link, then it'll take you straight to the registration for the summit. And the summit, there's no cost, but we are asking people if they can to make a donation. And we have categories, and you'll find that in the registration, information in the registration to what degree you want to make a donation. And if you do, you can do that, but make sure you mark your donation summit. But don't feel, if you can't make a donation, don't let that stop you from participating, please. And I hope to see some of you all at the summit.
Great, thank
Okay. Are there any more questions?
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for coming. We will send up a follow-up email with notes and information about the summit. So definitely register and donate if you can. It'll be really great. I'm sure a few of us here have already registered. But yeah, thank you so much again, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Ms. Muhammad.
Okay. Yeah, and I want to thank everybody for being here as well. And thank you, Akita, and you all for reaching out to us. I hope it's been helpful. If at any time you have other questions or want to just be in touch, you can just give me a call or shoot an email. And thank y'all so much. And again, I hope to see some of you at the summit. Thank you, and have a good evening, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week. Stay safe, keep your mask on, keep your hands washed, stay socially distant.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank y'all. Take care now.